First up on the agenda is public comment. Debbie, do you want to comment?
She's not close.
No, she's, okay. Seeing none, let's move to the action item. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
To approve the minutes, yes.
Yes, thank you. The minutes of October 2nd have been unanimously approved. Brad, do you want to speak to the information items, please?
Yes, so as you know, we don't have, PSA traditionally does not have a November board meeting, because it's usually during the week of Thanksgiving. And so we have an early meeting on December 5th as our last meeting of the year. And probably the most significant thing that's always on the December agenda is the first action item there, 6A, board officers and committee appointments. And I believe the three of you were on the nominating committee. So you know what those recommendations are, but that will come to the, that'll come before the meeting to then be effective on January 1st for the next year. We have to say goodbye. It's sad to Gloria Lepkit-Corrigan of track. She's term limiting off that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's great.
She's really great.
She does a good job on the presentation of what
I
happened.
hate that term limit thing.
Cassandra manipulated a nice change to their rules and regulations to make it a temporary term limit thing. They basically can re-up in 6 months.
Well, how long is the term?
They are two-year terms. The first, however, I think she's been on the committee for 5 years because the first time we split them into two groups. One got 3-year terms and one that got 2-year terms so that we have a nice steady stream of folks who stay on. So half of them are sort of reappointed every other year. So there are a couple that would like to stay on. And so we recently changed the bylaws to have them sit off for 6 months before they reapply. And if they reapply and there's an opening, we can appoint them as quickly as possible. We've also changed it to rolling applications. So this was something that was agreeable to the committee, but they did not want to eliminate the term limits.
Do we have an interim for that 6-month period, the window?
Well, they'll choose their board officer, their committee officers at their next meeting, and those officers will be good for the entire year.
Their meeting is next Tuesday,
Yes.
the 13th. So it'll be good.
I think she'll still be around.
Yeah.
Been very, very good.
She's-
And it's just rare that you find someone as committed who actually shows up.
Yeah, we've been lucky. We've had 2 good chairs in a row. I think it's great that they come and give a presentation to the PSTA board.
We do have some good interest from others who I think will be also be very committed.
Yeah, it's a really good committee.
I'm glad you said that, because I mean, we revamped the whole track committee and have a lot more new people on, so this could be a really good opportunity to help build some of that leadership.
Yeah. It's all I ever hoped and dreamed, right? Even better than I thought it was going to be. 5B on the consent agenda looks like the most exciting thing you've ever seen, I know. Option year delegation authority, but that's sort of a cleanup procedural item that will make Alan excited and happy.
What does it mean?
Well, Mr. Barkley might note as the chair of the finance committee that over the past 5 or 6 months, we've had a number of action items that have gone on the consent, which are contracts that PSTA has mostly with maintenance, parts suppliers, and other kinds of tools and equipment and stuff like that, where we have like a 5-year contract, but it's a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options. And about 6 months ago, Alan Zimmett came up with a new decision, new ruling, that said that the PSTA board has to specifically authorize the CEO to exercise those option years in years 4 and 5.
Didn't we just do that with one year?
We've been doing it piecemeal on about 5 or 6 different contracts as they've come up for renewal, as they come up at the end of year 3. And so this is, we've looked ahead to the current fiscal year, and there's something like 19 different contracts that are coming up. And we're going to ask the board for approval just of those option years, no dollar change or anything like that, on all 19 at once. The board can give that authorization, sort of just a efficiency thing.
So may I ask, please, who is on the finance committee with you, Joe?
Well, we just lost
Scott.
Brian Scott.
Vince Cox.
We have Richard Bennett. We have Josh Schulman. And we have David Edwards.
So,
I think they'll be understanding of this.
well, it's not that I'm worried about. What I want, it's about something else I wanted to bring up. How much longer isn't Josh coming up for renewal or a new appointment?
I believe we just reappointed him. Yeah? As far as the city of St. Pete goes, he's been a really good representative. He's been doing some heavy lifting on the finance committee. Those are special skills that he brings that not everyone on the board has.
What I wanted to
Yeah.
put out there was this conversation that we were having a few minutes ago reminded me that way back after the failure of Greenlight, you'll remember this, Brad. I attended my first executive committee meeting. I thought I was going to eat my brain cells because there were only 3 people on it. And so that's when we began to work on the committee structure and expanded the committees to include, past chairs and to put somebody on that would be a rising star in leadership. So we had a bench from which to pull people from.
Yeah.
But I remember clearly at that meeting, there was an effort to really cap the CEO's authority to purchase or to make decisions regarding contracts like we're talking about now. And it seems to me that in failure, there's a lot of things that are learned. And from that point back then to where we are today, I think you could probably agree we are a much different agency than we were right after Greenlight. On so many fronts, it's not even funny. I mean, it'd be interesting just to kind of create a little bullet point of what we look like then. You're good at doing that and articulating, I think it's important we remember where we've been and how far we've come.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's ever documented. And that might be something, Trish, that you could look at in terms of a scorecard. Because I don't think the staff and the whole agency is given enough credit for the miles we have come. And as it relates to that, on the county commission at least, we evaluate each budget year the authority of the county administrator, who will often make recommendations to us about either increasing, decreasing, or expanding different roles that can make it easier for the agency to function. And somehow or other, in my head, this conversation we had about what Alan wanted to do here, was kind of tickled that thought process, that maybe it's time to revisit that, because the cap is really low, isn't it about 25,000? Or did I get that wrong?
Well, we do have, in our bylaws, the spending authority that you grant to me as the CEO is all laid out. Anything over $25,000 has to be reported to the PSTA board, and we do that every month. Anything over $100,000 needs to get the PSTA board to approve. And almost all of those contracts go to the PSTA Finance Committee first for a recommendation, and then if they're fairly routine kinds of services and things like that, then they typically go on to the consent agenda, and the Finance Committee decides that, decides whether they recommend it to go on the consent or the regular full agenda.
Okay, that's great, I had forgotten the top end of that.
And we actually do have, if I might interject, we actually do have pretty robust discussions on items routinely in the Finance Committee meetings, where we have always someone who is there to brief, whether it's Brad or whether it's one of the department heads on the specific items. And we also discuss, what's involved, whether it's better to do it in-house or externally, and what the ramifications are to multiple-year contracts. So I think those kinds of things are covered in the Finance Committee before we ever bring it to the full board for approval.
I think it's really good to be reminded of what the processes are, because if you've been paying attention, the press seems to have a real spotlight on these agencies around the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah.
CareerSource is one, Construction Licensing Board has been another one. Now they're looking into some nonprofits and the way in which their financial reconciliations are taking place. And not to open Pandora's box or anything, it's just nice to take a look at that every now and then from a leadership perspective and see if there aren't things that maybe need to be tweaked or changed. Unless you've already done that, Joe, and I'm not aware, it just seems to me that it's good to just revisit that, so that we can legitimately say that the board is owning our budget. Because too many board members are really not paying attention to the nuts and bolts. And I think we've moved a long way in the way we've structured our committees to ensure that we give people opportunities to learn. I don't know if anybody agrees, disagrees, would say so.
Well, I think that the relative stability we've had on the Finance Committee for the last couple of years has helped, I think. And even though, I often think that the committee structure that works in Tallahassee and in Congress doesn't really particularly work that great on PSTA because of the sunshine laws. It's not like you can really talk to Joe as the chair of the Finance Committee and know all of the discussions that he had. You're not really all allowed to do that. But I think generally the board does somewhat have confidence or trust in the Finance Committee, has reviewed an item, and it's worked out pretty smoothly.
So is it possible, though, that when you have those robust discussions on particular items, that you might give a more comprehensive report to the board?
Well, it depends on whether it's going to be a vote on that particular item or whether it's going to just be included in the grouping that we put through as automatic. So, on consent, yes. So, we can have a more full disclosure or full discussion on that, but generally, the issues that come up that are brought before the board are the more important ones, the more large number ones. And so a lot of the items that we do are fairly mundane and routine, and those go on the consent.
Okay, I'll let this subject matter go right now. Just please be mindful if all of a camera and a microphone and ask you a specific question about what you voted on regarding our PSTA budget, if you'd be able to answer it. It isn't a pleasant feeling when you don't.
You say, I'd like to refer you to our public relations person, Whitney Fox,
Yes, we did.
who will help you answer that question, right?
Well, you know what that feels like. Remember when
I do
Mrs.
know,
Space
I
used to
know.
show up at every meeting and it wasn't
Yep.
fun? I'm just trying to make sure we don't go through that again.
So you can see on there, item 5C is, PSTA is moving into this mobility management, arena. I think, maybe faster than almost any other transit system in the country. And we're taking what once started out as pilot programs, and they're becoming part of our operation. And with that, we are putting together what I like to call, like, I'm copying from Congress. You know how Congress does the omnibus bills, where they lump a whole bunch of bills together and they prove it all as one. Or this is it's actually my Bonnie Epstein omnibus. Bonnie is overseeing all of our mobility programs, and we're taking all of the contracts with all of our providers, which is a growing number. Care Ride, of course, but Uber, Lyft, there's a couple of wheelchair companies, all have contracts, and they all have different expiration dates and amounts and things like that. And we're now getting an organized system for all those different providers. And those will go to the finance committee. You'll see those first, and then to the board. But those are just keeping those providers approved, so they can keep providing service.
So Brad, mobility management, does that mean our autonomous vehicle pilot project that I thought was going to be launched any moment? Where are we with that?
This item 5C does not include that, but we are making a little bit of progress, I think, on our getting an autonomous vehicle pilot going in Pinellas County. There is a hold, a nationwide hold on all autonomous vehicle testing right now by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that we're caught in, but there's some meetings going on as of this week, I think,
Yes.
to maybe shake that loose and allow us.
So can we give that update at the board meeting? Because, in this last year, first it was going to be in May, then it was going to be in June. Oh, yeah, well, then it's going to be in August, and then it was going to be in maybe early November. And now I'm hearing it's a crapshoot.
So we can talk about the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration's hold on these. That's,
Well, is there something we can get Harry to do to unlock the, I know there's issues with.
Harry is
safety.
engaged.
yes, Harry's engaged. We have the new information for our waiver documentation. We've been working with the vehicle manufacturer because they have to submit the waiver application. So they've asked us a couple more questions. I think that'll be submitted in the next couple of weeks, and then we don't know how long they'll take to turn that around. And we're looking at some other ways that we can have partnerships that will move this along.
May I ask real quick, does this have to do with the weight and speed restrictions?
No?
So a lot of it has to do with the driverless aspect and the fact that there is no steering wheel.
And the people that got killed, that's why they do
Yeah.
that.
Right.
So,
There was a woman that got hit by an autonomous vehicle in
yes,
Phoenix.
yeah,
Um,
they put everybody to a stop.
Our latest iteration was, we were hoping to launch on November 1st. Gainesville had hoped to, I think August 22nd was their launch date. And then the moratorium on all testing happened summer, like about August 1st, and so they were the first ones got put on hold. And then we still held out hope that we could do it, but no.
So
I'm sorry.
one of the new rules that we're trying to follow through is the operator needs to own the vehicle. So part of the new waiver requirements, whoever is operating the vehicle has a direct relationship with the vehicle itself. And so it can no longer be a separate relationship with the transit agency unless the transit agency is going to buy the vehicles or engage somebody to operate them who owns this particular vehicle. And the waiver used to be for the vehicle itself and then the use case, and now it's the entire thing, both the vehicle itself, the use case, and the operator.
We had a discussion of this at the last transportation meeting at League of Cities by an expert, and the issue seems to be that the decision tree for the computer is what failed in the incident in Arizona where the bicyclist was killed. And it has to, it sounds kind of mundane, but the decision tree and the computer has to determine, do I run over the dog, or do I run a red light, or do I do, whatever the case might be. And in that particular instance, there was insufficient data on the sideways way in which that person came in front of the vehicle. And so that's what happened there. But the entire software program for the autonomous vehicle project has got to be rewritten and further screened, for want of a better term, to actually be able to make the correct decisions. Not that humans always make the correct decisions either, but make the correct decisions in these decision tree situations. And so that what they've done basically is just pull all the funding back on moving forward with autonomous vehicles until those issues are resolved. And apparently it's not a simple fix. Apparently there's a lot of rewriting of code and so on that is involved in the whole process to be able to make those kinds of decisions. So we didn't have a transportation meeting last month because of the hurricane. The people from Panhandle couldn't get there, obviously. And so I don't know what's going to happen with the next one. We may get more data on that. But that's where my understanding is of where we stand right now with regard to the autonomous vehicle project.
And Joe, I also thought that in addition to everything you just said, it becomes more complicated with higher speeds because there's more information to collect looking further ahead. You can get a lot of ghost images that could be confused with a real person in the street.
That's all part of the code.
But the slower speeds might be easier to start off with first.
Okay,
On the action items, we've got the board officer and committees. 6B, we're still determining whether we're going to be buying some buses.
what? What do you mean?
6B, we might defer this to the January board meeting. We're not sure yet.
What's the issue?
The every transit system in Florida participates together on a consortium purchase to save a lot of money, millions of dollars, in the purchase of buses. Pretty much every city in Florida, every city in the United States buys their buses using federal grant dollars. So FTA is supportive of all the Florida systems going together to save money. That contract, which has been a 5-year contract, expires on December 13th. Henry Lukasik, our maintenance director, is chairing the selection committee for the new one with his brethren of maintenance gurus from around the state. And they're assessing the bids right now for the new bus that will start on January, the new contract that will start. on January 1st. So we're trying to see when would be the lowest, which would be cheaper to buy under the existing contract before December 13th ends, or the new contract. And the idea would be that we would be able to save money by ordering perhaps now, or either under one of the two contracts, and then do what we did a couple years ago and buy 2 years worth of replacement buses at once, which will also save us probably more than $1 million, I would think. So we're just looking at that right now.
Do we know how many buses we're looking at acquiring per year over the next couple of years?
We're looking at 16 buses, 4 of which would be electric buses, so we'll be looking at about 12 hybrid electric buses.
Yeah.
Well,
So Henry's off to Jacksonville, I think, to evaluate the bids, I think tomorrow. So I'll know for sure whether this is going to be on the agenda or not.
so am I getting this correctly, that we are looking at buying 16 versus 6?
Over the next 2 years, we have programmed a total of 16 buses,
All electric?
4 of which are electric.
Well, that's not enough. I mean, I'm just saying that because beyond the information that I learned when we were down in South Florida last week, I just came from the Regional Planning Council meeting, and there was a scientist there representing the concerned scientists of, I forgot what the technical name.
Union of Concerned Scientists.
Yes. And the information she gave us about our carbon footprint was daunting. And as a public agency, I do think that that's an issue, Brad, that we should bring a few of those folks that have presented to us at the Regional Planning Council and bring them to us for a presentation. Because every public agency that takes tax dollars has an enormous amount of influence that we could be sharing in terms of, if we don't do this stuff, there is an unbelievable cost of doing not the right thing. In terms of our tax base, I mean, I'm just saying, it can get very political, but we have managed to wiggle right down that line. And you know we got 25 governments to sign on to that MOU.
I know.
And now this next year, we're working on bringing the entire business community to the table. Because at the end of the day, besides it's the right thing to do, it's a huge economic issue.
Yep.
So how do we figure that out to make all 16 electric? Poor old David is the story.
He might. But, well, again, these are replacing our non-electric diesel oldest buses in the fleet. Vehicles. We are actively pursuing substantial dollars to be able to afford converting the entire fleet someday to all electric. And we've started to do a lot more detailed analysis of what that will take as far as energy consumption at this facility. It's substantial. The upgrades, the electric power. We don't want to turn off all the lights in Pinellas Park when we fire up the fleet.
Right,
So
but the other part of that is, isn't there an opportunity to convert solar to the electric and take advantage of that and maybe save a substantial amount of money? I don't know what the electric bill is for your facility here, but what if, nor do I know what the roof looks like because I've never been up there, but what if we had a totally solarless system? I mean, have you ever been up to the Budweiser Great Bay Distributors place? They went from paying $25,000 a month on an electric bill to less than $2,500 a month. That's unbelievable.
yeah, no, I know. I mean, we've been analyzing that as well, about we've got a ton of parking lot space here.
I was gonna say the parking
um,
lot.
That we could, I'd be more than happy to turn into a solar array.
You could be making money off of it and selling it back to the grid.
We could.
Why are you laughing? This is serious stuff.
Do not laughing, we've been asking for this in the planning department for a while.
Right.
Well,
Susan Lickman's gonna, promised when we were down in Miami that she's gonna help me get this money from Duke Power to do that.
but it isn't just Duke Power. There's several, there was a lady that I want to say it was Kresge or Kellogg or one of those big foundations that has millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah,
now
Kresge
for
Foundation.
folks that are, doing this kind of thing. So there's an incentive all the way around to really push the pedal to the metal and make it happen.
Yeah, no doubt.
He's laughing at me, Cassandra.
May I just say something, and I just something today to come back to and talk about later, and I'm wearing my St. Pete hat. But we are about to start what we call a Green Fleets program that we're going to ramp up, and maybe there would be ways to look at partnerships with local governments.
There you
like
go.
St. Pete, where we could also contribute to offset the extra cost of electric buses that would run in the city.
And county government, let's not forget county government, we have huge fleets.
Yeah.
Good idea.
No, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. We want to move as fast as we possibly can on this.
Well, okay, but
We have a contract with BYD to purchase up to 25 of that, if we can identify the funding.
don't say if, say when.
When we identify the
It's
funding.
better karma language.
I will say that we have made some, these vehicles, and we've made some substantial improvements in our hybrid technology as well, so that those, the transmissions we're now buying in those vehicles make them operate exactly like a Chevy Volt, where it becomes an electric vehicle. And then when the battery needs to be charged, it is the only time it uses the engine. And that already, Henry tells me, is substantially improving our overall MPG. We just got the first with that new transmission, and it's already paying off. Last thing, 6C, which, Commissioner Long, I think you're gonna be concerned that this is not moving forward very fast either, is also inspirational. As you know, we have a an ongoing relationship with HART that we were very proud to collaborate together. We have an MOU that is renewable on an annual basis. It's been renewed 2 times in the past, and it identifies 5, I think there's 5 now, areas in which we'd like to collaborate together on. Over the past year, some of those collaboration areas have seen setbacks. As you may know, we had been sharing 2 different functions, procurement and risk management. And this not instigated by PSTA, but instigated by HART, we're no longer sharing a procurement person, and our risk manager is only being used on a very minimal basis. They're kind of going on their own with risk management as well. They've asked that they've decided that they're not going to consider this MOU renewal until after they have a new leader, which will be sometime in 2019. But we think, it expires on December 31st, I think.
Yes.
So we think it's sort of symbolic and appropriate for the PSTA board to take this action now, to show that we're interested and willing to commit to partner where we can, whenever they're ready.
So do you have a list of their current HART board members?
Yes, yeah.
Just someone on the staff or whatever, Number two, depending on what happens tomorrow at the ballot box, Wednesday could be a whole new day.
Yes.
And I think the only thing that we at PSTA can be responsible for is our own behavior on this issue. And I wholeheartedly encourage us to go ahead and, even if it's symbolic, Brad, it shows our willingness to partner.
Yeah.
And in county government, we have this fabulous little thing that we're constantly saying, with partners, you can do more. For some worldly reason, our Hillsborough friends haven't figured that out yet. Given they get that $45 million in that referendum tomorrow,
Yeah.
they may decide that there's a lot more in it for them if they decide to be better players in the great big sandbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, two questions, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course.
One is, other than the fact that they're sort of running with a temporary leader right now, is there another reason why they don't want to continue with the partnership? That's one question. And I know we were successful in acquiring an excellent person as a result of that. But is there anything that have we done anything to cause this, or is this sort of a unilateral decision?
They don't like our success.
Sure, Debbie. They both report to you.
On a good note side of it, on the risk management side, Diane was brought in, Diane Randall, our risk director, was brought in to help them out and to get them trained up. She's added staff, turned over staff, she's done that. She has mentored someone in a management role there. So she has done what they have asked of us. So now she is on a consulting basis. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. We've been successful in what we've been tasked to do. You know, for Al Burns, who was their procurement director, who left and then came with us, you know, I'm not sure what the issue is there, but we're very happy to have his full attention. We still are doing things together. On Thursday of this week, we are meeting with, having Hart here to do a DBE presentation of the projects that both companies will be doing and the different goods and services we'll be procuring.
Yeah.
So we're still doing a lot together, even though it may not be formalized going forward. I think staff will continue to go down that road.
Yes.
Oh,
Hold on. Can you hold your question and then I'll come back to you? Sure. Okay, go ahead.
So on T-BARDA, we now have our PSTA and HART representatives on that board. So has T-BARDA or will T-BARDA provide more of an environment where PSTA and HART can work together, communicate more in that realm?
That might be possible, but not for a while.
Not for a while.
I mean, they have no staff to speak of, and we're providing all the backbone support for them. But it is another really good example of how with partners you can do more, because thanks to Debbie and her fabulous team, as well as our planners, I mean, we've just really put T-BARDA in a whole different place today, both in the eyes of the state and at the federal level.
And that's, thank you for mentioning that, because that's, you know, I was just thinking of when, like 4 years ago, I think it was Senator Latvala who was kind of beating the drums to kind of march us down the aisle to merge the two transit agencies, and then we did the KPMG study that looked at how, what would work or not work, what we would save or not save by merging the two agencies. And as a result of that process, we did start working together with these, what was originally meant to be these quarterly meetings to meet with HART. We had 1 or 2 meetings, and out of those ideas, I think from that point is where we got the idea to share procurement and risk management staff.
And it was an
And like all
incredibly
this-
positive
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Bell's gone, Hart's interest in this kind of fizzles out, but T-BARTA kind of remains to be that regional transportation environment where, we're shining, PSTA is doing quite well.
And to that point, there was one commissioner who really made mention of that in our TMA meetings, you remember that? It didn't please her that all of the money and all the attention was coming to PSTA.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Everything you said is right on. I mean, I think there was some momentum under the former leader of Hart, and then the fact that we did have, I don't know if we ever got 4 meetings in 1 year, but we got a couple of meetings, as long as we were willing to go over to Hillsborough County, that we did have, and there was some good momentum on that. And I think there was an interest back then of seeing what other opportunities there might be and being more exploratory. And then when they had a change in leadership and fiscal problems, they kind of, that has gone away. Looking more inwardly. And I think their board has also sort of led some of that philosophy as well. So maybe something will happen tomorrow that will cause some domino effect of changes, maybe. Hopefully.
No, I had a couple of questions, Madam Chair.
Yes.
One is, what's taking them so long to acquire another CEO? That's one question. The other question is, have we looked a little farther afield to Manatee, Sarasota, Pasco, and so on, to see about enlarging sort of our grouping in terms of consolidation and purchases together, sharing management ideas where it makes sense, and so on.
Answer to question number 1, why is it taking them so long? They voted deliberately to delay it, to delay recruitment of a new CEO until after the referendum tomorrow. And I believe their motion actually was to start it on November 7th, Wednesday. But then I heard just on Friday that they were going to wait until January 1st to start advertising for the new CEO. And then number 2, have we looked at Pasco or Manatee? I can't say that we really have looked at them in great detail, in a lot, although we are starting to collaborate a little bit more with Pasco than we have in the past. Both those systems are substantially smaller than Hart. We're working with them on some grant applications and some of our transportation disadvantage activities. They seem to be more interested in working with us than Hart is. So we're happy to work with them. And of course, the whole region is working really hard. A lot of activities going on the Flamingo fairs, which includes, maybe it doesn't include Manatee. I think it does? Hernando.
Pasco, Hernando, Sarasota, Hart.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have any other questions on that? That brings us to our next item on the executive committee agenda, and it's going to be on the board as an info item. Trish is going to tell you a little bit about our scorecard, which you've now seen many times, I know. But moving forward, I'm recommending that the executive committee of PSTA is the one that would review this versus one of the other committees of PSTA.
All right, hello. I'd like to share with you all, and you should have in front of you, our Q4 scorecard. And this is wrapping up our first full year using the scorecard. To refamiliarize you with the layout of it, we have our 5 key strategic areas along the left-hand side. We have metrics within each key area that are described in detail and have a performance goal laid out and have the number of points that that goal is potentially worth. Now here at the end of the year, we have a completely filled out scorecard where each metric has a score, not only for each quarter, but also a year-to-date score. In most cases, that year-to-date score is an average. There are a couple of metrics that are tracked and measured cumulatively throughout the year, so that year-to-date score will reflect the Q4 score. More information about how each metric is defined and measured, and information about how that year-to-date column is tracked is on the final sheet. I know it's a little bit small writing here, but there's more information to refer to if you're wondering what a particular metric means or what the year-to-date scorecard column is reflecting. So with that kind of refresher on the anatomy of the scorecard, what I'd like to do is turn your attention back to the scorecard itself. This is a draft version. There is one metric, it's org 14. It's within the employee engagement strategic area. We're looking at the percentage of our employees who completed their individual business-related goals during the year. That's being measured during this month as we do our performance management year-end process. So we'll have that metric completed in time for the December 12th board meeting, but it is the final one that's still being worked on. You can see that we are at 97 out of 100 for the year. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, that score will be a little higher depending on the final score for org 14. The stoplight grid here gives you a picture of the performance of the metrics. Green indicates that the performance was within 90% of the original goal. Yellow is 75 to 89% of the goal, and a red is 74% or lower. I'll just make a couple of notes about things you'll see in the year-to-date column. The two yellow scores, the survey of area residents and the employee engagement survey, as you know, we just had reporting out to the board on the performance of those two surveys for our community and for our employees, and the showing for both was very strong. The somewhat lower scores there both reflect in those cases that the survey was completed just a little bit behind the schedule that was originally developed in the beginning of the year. Going forward on FY19's scorecard, both of those will be measured by the score that we receive, and we've set a bar for ourselves that's based on the results that we got this year. We do have also on org 3 improved environmental sustainability indicators. We were able to improve on 3 this year. Those were reduced water use, reduced energy use, and increased recycling. So we are continuing to improve in that area in FY19 through the use of our hybrid and our electric buses, as well as trying to drive air pollutants down. The final one that I'll make a note of here is org 16, our annual voluntary departures. We came in a bit higher than we were aiming for on that metric, and we are going through a strategic engagement plan for the year, which we talked about in the last board meeting, that's trying to target that on many fronts through our survey, through focus groups, through opportunities for employees to get involved in the performance of the agency. So we do expect to see some of those efforts pay off in a better performance of that metric next year. Speaking of, you mentioned sharing best business practices and collaboration with other agencies. One thing I'm excited to tell you guys about for next year is that we're launching employee-involved, employee-led metric improvement teams. We have our orientation meeting for that next week. We've invited employees at every level, from senior managers to bus operators and mechanics, to volunteer to be part of small teams that will research metrics, look at opportunities to improve our performance, and really get involved in making this a stronger agency and helping to improve our performance on our scorecard and other goals. This is actually something that we learned from PalmTran. We've been working, we collaborate closely with them on a number of things. They have a similar scorecard program that they implemented just a little bit before we did. And we had a peer exchange day where a contingent of PalmTran management came to PSTA and talked about their scorecard. We talked about ours. We really shared some ideas that have made the program successful. And one of the most impressive things that we learned from them is this program that they have on top of their scorecard to form employee teams and get those teams engaged in improving performance. So we're borrowing that concept, we're tailoring it to PSTA, and our teams will be meeting for the first time this quarter.
So, in this performance scorecard, how did you measure the legislative advancements and initiatives?
So that one was measured based on issues that we supported, initiatives that would benefit PSTA moving forward in the state and legislative process, advanced during either current state or federal sessions throughout the fiscal year.
Do we have with regard to the voluntary departures, do we have a sort of metric that describes how many people we need to retain in order to keep our system running smoothly, not only in terms of remaining people having adequate skills and knowledge and work experience, but also making sure that they provide a positive sort of training program and ability to have new employees demonstrate their performance. How do we have that so we don't either have too many people sticking around, or how do we have it where we don't have enough people continuing to be hiring and training people?
Right. That's a great question. One of the things that we're diving into with our employee focus groups that will start in January is what are the most challenging aspects of working here. I will tell you that that number is largely driven by turnover in our bus operator group, which I believe we've made some great strides in our new labor union contract to improve the pay, especially in those early couple of years, which is where we see the greatest, the higher level of turnover. Once folks have been here for a couple of years in that role, they tend to stay. So I believe that's, addressing the financial issue is going to help. But in the focus groups, we're really going to be looking at the things that make that, maybe a more challenging job than it has to be, and trying to address that. This metric of less than 6% of our folks overall through the agency turning over voluntarily is what we're trying to hit in order to make sure that we're hitting, the stable agency that we need to be.
Okay, well, then, just as a follow-up then, if bus drivers is our primary problem area, is that being overweighted, or, because if we're retaining, executive trainee type people or whatever, other groups,
Yeah.
is that skewing the report because bus drivers are a problematic situation?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the performance of that metric is almost entirely driven by the performance in the bus.
But that's
operator.
because they are 60% of all of our employees.
Yeah.
Ah.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
Our
yes.
bus drivers.
Yeah, so it's this, so no matter how you formulate it, that's always going to be.
Yes. Yeah. They'll always be the biggest piece of
Drives
it.
the number.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of Trish. She has done awesome job of really diving into a lot of this employee engagement stuff in great detail, as you know. She segmented the data on our employee engagement survey by bus operator women, who rated a lot lower than their male counterparts in their own attitude about being engaged with the organization.
Why is that?
We don't know exactly.
We're doing some research to try to find that out.
So she's creating a focus group of bus operator women to find out.
Yeah.
Well, that little trolley driver that I had that one time on Clearwater couldn't have been more amenable, helpful, friendly, knowledgeable. And oh my Lord, that woman had the patience of a saint.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have fantastic drivers, men and women. We don't know what the answers are going to be yet. My guess is that it may come down to different, perhaps family care challenges that women face than men do.
I have a great idea. We could start a nursery here. A daycare center. Debbie.
Some employers do that. They do.
They sure do.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Brad?
We have it. It's called DMARTA.
Oh, my God. Darling.
Yeah.
So, Trish, this is great on a lot of levels. I'm a big fan of this, because if we're not measuring it, we're not managing it. But we are really hitting our numbers. And in some cases, exceeding the goals that we set. So it's fair to ask the question, do we need to increase our goals? And also, just to kind of put this to the test, we are really doing well as an agency. But for example, let's just start with community support. So if we started to do things where we stopped communicating with residents about the value of PSTA, eventually we'd see those numbers decline.
Sure, yeah.
If we stopped reaching out, looking for support from funding partners, that number would go down. If we stopped thinking strategically about how we approach state and federal agencies, my guess is those numbers would start to trend downward too. And if ridership were to plummet, then we would see that reflected in some of the numbers with financial stability, maybe?
We would see that in our passenger trips per revenue hour. We may also see it in the budget variance. We'd have to make accommodations for that elsewhere in the budget to try to keep that on target.
Great, and if we were to slack off in our service to impaired transit, again, those would be numbers that we would see shift down. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're doing really well, and these numbers reflect that we are extremely focused, but we have to keep it up.
Right.
We can't just pat ourselves on the back and not continue to try to improve, because if we do slack off, there's a number of areas where we would start to see those numbers come down.
Right. I want to say 2 board meetings ago, we brought the FY19 scorecard. And we did use, at that point, 3/4 worth of data to select performance goals that were in most cases more challenging based on the performance that we had seen and achieved this year. So we will continue to challenge ourselves and make improvements in areas even that we feel that we're doing well in.
Richard Bennett asked the same question that was just asked.
Well, I think I asked it in a nice way.
Yeah.
You did, and I would just like to suggest that before the board meeting, it might be good to review the questions that he specifically asked. I spent a lot of time talking to him at the graduation exercises. He and I sat outside for about 20 minutes because we got there early. And he's really enjoying being on PSTA. And I think if there was a way, just suggesting, for you to begin your comments by referencing the answers to some of the questions that he asked last year, it might help him feel more like, oh, wow, he really paid attention to me. And mitigate his potential to double dip, huh?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I'll do that.
I used to say that,
You liked hers?
I liked her question better than Richard's.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, you know, he's a bit of a tough cookie, and he's got a very, very interesting background. And it's a way to just take the wind out of his sails before he gets all wound up and starts looking at it.
I think if we were to have done this 10 years ago, there wouldn't be a 97. But we don't know how to get to a 97 unless we do this.
Yeah.
But I think to address Mr. Bennett's concerns, I think, you know, there are a lot of times we can go back in time and try this process, and it wouldn't look as good as what we're doing.
Sure.
Well, that's because he doesn't have the institutional history that some of us do. Because if you had done this right after green light, probably wouldn't.
Well, I have spent a lot of time with him and talking to him
He loves the breakfast.
about this, yeah. And one of the things that I think he's appreciative of, you know, in response to the questions that he asked, that Trish mentioned, is next year's scorecard is specifically focused, in what we can tell him, what we have told him, is that the goals now are based on either improving over this year, year one, so the baseline, internally, or an outside benchmark, you know, to have some outside target, say from the benchmarking group or other transit systems or whatever it might be, to the extent that we can target something that we didn't make up ourselves, and we get a 97 on that, you know, he agrees, but you can't really argue with that, you know.
We
So if we're
also-
starting out with this as our baseline, how do we go higher? I mean, do you think maybe we started too low? Just asking.
Right. Well, I know that every department is working on process improvements, innovations, efficiencies. That's part of what these employee teams are going to be looking at as well. So I think in some cases there are areas that we can, you know, continue to make improvements. We know more about our own baselines now too. So we've had a more educated position to create an FY19 scorecard than we did when we made this.
So is there a way to use this data to drive ridership, you think, maybe? I don't know, I'm just asking, it's probably a
Yeah.
dumb question.
I mean, we're constantly looking at all the different ways in which we might increase ridership, using all this data. You know, that's the basis of our whole bus planning exercise that we're going through right now. I mean, on the different routes and adjusting the routes to focus on the core routes, is looking at a whole bunch of different data on ridership trends and things like that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good job, Trish.
All right, thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks.
Now, this conversation leads me to ask, and I know we probably want to try this up here in a minute, but given that tomorrow, crazy amendment 1 passes, are we doing our homework, Debbie Trump and anyone else here, to ensure that because we're at our cap, we still have a plan to be okay?
We presented during the budget process that we've been planning this in there, assuming that it passes, and staff is working hard this year. We have a $1.7 million deficit in the budget to try to close that gap. But we're good out to the 2021 at this point. But you're right, it's something we need to keep our eye on to continue to either increase revenues or decrease expenses.
We're also very excited or focused on January 18th is a funding workshop
I'm excited about
with PSTA and the county and Ford Pinellas, as well as the mayor's council, I think, is all going to be invited to that. And working with the Ford Pinellas staff to present, the situation, different ways in which we might move forward, generate additional dollars.
What is the possibility that we could focus on those 5, I think it is, municipalities that are not part of our ad valorem? Can we get them on board somehow?
I think that could be possibly part of the discussion. It's again, not something that within our control, at least what I'm told by Alan, that they would have to initiate that.
Well, I know
Is
they,
that, can that be done at the legislative? level?
yes.
Yeah.
Could be done with a local.
You know, in other words, with a fiat from above, in effect, as opposed to having each of them opt in? We'll just make it mandatory.
We can check into that.
Could you ask Alan to get us a copy of that resolution that our beloved Senator Jones passed in 19, wherever that was, that exempted them? There's specific language in there. I thought it expired at a certain time, and that time has come and gone, as I
Well.
recall. Really?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
What? Did I read that?
No, I think that's correct.
Aha!
I can see if I can.
So how about
We can look into that.
we look into that?
Yeah.
And how about we work on messaging with me, since you're the messenger,
Two of those.
and figure out how we resurrect that issue. Because there was a drop dead date, and I'm pretty sure I didn't just make that up.
Two of those cities are in my grouping. 2 are in Richards, I think. And I'm not sure whether the 5th one was.
Kansas City is in yours.
Kansas City and Treasure Island. No, actually, that's one of Richards also. So it's Treasure Island.
St. Pete Beach.
And St. Pete Beach. And
Bel
Air
Air,
Beach.
Bel Air Beach, which is not in yours, which is in
That's
his.
not in mine either, yeah. The thing is, the problem is that they feel that they wouldn't get adequate services for what their assessment would be. But the other side of it is, if, for instance, in Bel Air Beach, they don't want a bus stop. They don't want people riding the bus. So that's an issue that,
I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
That just says to me, we haven't come up with the right message. And I think it's something we could work on. And do you have the capability to, where do we have to go to, I should know the answer to this, Debbie, to figure out how much additional revenue that would bring to
Oh,
PSTA?
we've got that data.
I would really like to have that, and then just sit down and quietly and figure out what the message should be. Because in reality, they've been getting away with a free ride for a long time.
Yeah, and see, it's, like, for instance, Gulfport would like to join that group.
Try what group?
The group that's out.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
so
no.
we've got to make them stop that.
Who said that?
Yeah? Oh, we've had,
They have one council member who
yeah.
Well,
asked,
Mhm.
I think they wrote us a letter
Yeah.
on his request about what it would take for them to leave PSTA
why was
and
that?
opt out.
Why did they want to leave?
Because they don't, this one city councilman there doesn't believe that they're getting any value out of
Yeah,
public
they-
transportation in
They
their
feel that
community.
their fees exceed the benefit to their client base. And the other thing is that they were thinking of basically having a little, for want of a better term, blooper of their own to handle the needs of their client base. So we don't want to get that further afield.
And I hear you, I'm here to tell you that there's a casino down there that lot of people from outside their own little world,
Mhm.
3 or 4 times a week, I happen to know, because I happen to be one of them.
Mhm.
And some of the people from St. Pete,
Mhm.
that we town around with, also are joining us there,
Mhm.
and that is a balance.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that issue was nixed. It's not possible for
Thank
them to
Mhm.
leave. They would have to have a voter referendum, and the PSTA board would have to agree to let them leave, according to Alan. So that, I haven't heard that in over a year or two.
Yeah, Judge, stop spreading those nasty.
Yeah, I was just.
It just has come up from time to time, people,
Just teasing you, I'm crying out.
yeah.
Okay, so good conversation with people. We have lots to think about, talk about, and do. So, any other things we need to talk about today? Are we good at the order? Brad is looking.
Commissioner Long and I, and Commissioner Barkley, right? And Cassandra are going to Indianapolis later this week
Where you're allowed, Johns.
Yeah, I was
with
just gonna say,
Ford
we-
Pinellas.
We're trying to decide what to pack.
For the women that are coming, do not come without a coat, please.
Well,
A scarf.
being somebody who didn't have a coat before,
What?
What's a coat?
Hey, listen,
we need a coat.
Ask Heather and ask
You're-
Ashley, because if you'd have been with us last year, they found out pretty quickly what a
Yeah.
code is. And boots and every other one thing they could lay their hands on.
Well, I wish I could go. We have National League of Cities in Los Angeles, otherwise.
It'll be warm.
What's the
It'll be
weather
better.
like in Los Angeles?
Who picked Indianapolis?
Good question.
Salt Lake City would have been nice. They got all of our money.
Well, the other option was Cleveland.
That's colder.
Okay, well then, if we don't have any other serious things, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you.
well, no, Wednesday.
Yeah. Friday night.
6 a.m.
Here's that resolution.
I assume that those you're going to give a full recap to the election results of the night before?
I will just.
I'm a poll watcher half the day.
Really? For Hart?
No, the moratoriums.
The 5 cities.
Oh, this was the PSTA board.
Right.
She was talking about some kind of state legislation that put a limit on it, which I don't think is true, but.
That's what I think we need to start from the top, just kind of say, yeah, that's what we really need,
Yep.
and you guys are gonna be. That's what we need.
The PSTA board,
I know, they gave up.
it gave up, they put a moratorium, they were not allowed to talk about it for 5 years.
It expired in 2010,
Okay,
so let's start
so
talking
we
about.
should have jumped right on that. Okay, guys.
So let's see, what's the weather in Indianapolis?
What do you bring? Is that gonna be like soup?
That's a good question, I was gonna ask you what you were gonna bring. I don't think I was gonna bring a tie.
Yeah,
I
I'll
don't
worry
know.
about that.
Rachel, have you heard anything about the
But
attire?
Basically, we're gonna assume that there were business attire.
Business casual, I think I remember seeing something.
That's what they said, business casual, which
Possibly.
means no tie, but,
Yeah, like a polo shirt,
It's warmer to wear a suit jacket.
but you might need a whole suit, wool
I
suit.
don't think anybody realizes how cold it is up there.
I sent out-
on Wednesday, high is 49, low is 30,
What's this?
45,
This is that
41, it's
meeting
gonna be freezing.
poll I had sent to, I have to move, you know, we had canceled last Friday's legislative. Can you take this with you and just let me know if any of these are good for you, or if you know offhand?
Which told me that he didn't think she wanted to stay on, she got off today.
Well,
Not really being on it.
for me, my clerk So,
Oh, I had to miss all these meetings because I'm.
we gotta do it, we gotta do it, I just
Brad?
make time.
What?
Monday is not the best day. for
On grounds?
Monday,
Well,
and,
it's-
any of them are okay.
So I've done anything. Okay.
So, what was it?
But anyhow, so-
Okay.
Oh,
Thanks for always having the information at the ready.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
I'm hoping
Thank
that,
you.
I guess there's a
Ladies,
grant
see you later.
thing that
Bye, Joe, thank you.